Hello, friends. I'm excited to be back with you again. Let's go ahead and continue a discussion. Let me share one of my PowerPoints here. Aircraft fuel systems, and we're going to talk real briefly about fueling and defueling and the possible test questions that you might get exposed to from your FAA test. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We talked last time about pressure fueling from underneath the aircraft. The most common with light aircraft is over the wing. You can see the gentleman on the ladder, and it looks like he's got in his hands a fuel hose. And this is a Cessna aircraft, and it is getting the over-the-wing refueling. Filling an aircraft fuel tank at the filler neck is called over-the-wing fueling. Here's an example of a fueling nozzle, and you can see there's an attached wire for attaching it to a ground surface so that you can bleed off any static electricity. Which of the following precautions is most important during refueling operations? Some of the options are A, all outside electrical sources must be disconnected from the aircraft. Well, that's semi-important. Is it the most important? B, fuel to be used must be appropriately identified. I like where they're going with that option. I'm not exactly crazy about the way it's worded. Or C, all electrical switches must be in the off position. The most important, basically, A and C are very similar to each other. So I would look a little closer at B. And one of the most important items when you're refueling is making sure you're putting the right fuel in it. You don't want to put jet fuel in an aircraft that takes avgas. So I'm going to go with B. B. And if we give this in the class, we can actually put up a poll so that you can vote on these yourself. Yeah, so make sure you have the right fuel. And hopefully the fuel has been properly identified. So it's very important to make sure. They do give an example here of what happens if you put jet fuel in a reciprocating engine aircraft. Basically, you can destroy the engine and the aircraft itself. An oral question that you may be asked: why should you wait for a period of time after fueling an aircraft before checking the fuel sumps? Now, we haven't talked about that up until this point, but let's say you have just fueled your aircraft. Do you immediately thereafter check the fuel in the fuel sumps, or do you it looks like the requirement is that you should wait a period of time. Why are you waiting a period of time? That's basically if there's any type of microorganisms or sediment in the fuel itself, it has a chance to settle. Let's see what that says. To allow time for water and contaminants to settle to the drain point. So get that word settle in, perhaps more than just water and contaminants sounds much better than what I had said. Because the drain is at the lowest part. Another written question. If an aircraft is fueled from a truck or storage tank which is known to be uncontaminated with dirt or water, periodic checks of the aircraft's fuel tank sumps and system strainers, and then they're giving us some options. So you know that the fuel truck is uncontaminated. So how does that affect your servicing of the aircraft itself? A, The periodic checks can be eliminated except for the strainer check before the first flight of the day and the fuel tank sump check during 100-hour and annual inspections. Um, or B, are still necessary due to the possibility of contamination from other sources. So far, I do like B better than A. I hate just eliminating anything out of hand just because you know that the truck is fine. It doesn't really relieve you of any type of responsibility to check to make sure the fuel that's actually in the aircraft is fine. Because of the possibility of contamination from other sources. So I like that so much. I'm barely going to read C, but always read it. Can be sharply reduced since contamination from other sources is relatively unlikely and of little consequence in modern aircraft fuel systems. It might be relatively unlikely, but the killer is and of little consequence. So that's why I would discount C. So I'm going to go ahead and stay with B as the proper response. And it is. Aircraft defueling should be accomplished. So this time we're not fueling, we're actually defueling the aircraft. Where would you say this, or how should this be accomplished? A, with the aircraft's communication equipment on and in contact with the tower in case of fire. No, that's not, the tower's not going to help you there. And a defueling operation uh, is quite lengthy. I mean, it could be a few hours. Um, so you're not going to be in contact with the tower for that long a period of time. Um, B, in a hangar where activities can be controlled. Uh, it has been done that way, but what's the best answer? C, in the open air for good ventilation, which is the correct answer. Often hangars, depending where you're located in the hangar, could have the good ventilation, but ideally you want it in the open air. What procedure must be followed when defueling aircraft with swept back wings? And here's an example of the swept back wings. Um, think of there being three fuel fuel tanks in each wing. One is closest to the root that usually holds the most of the fuel, and then there's the two outboard, or I guess they would be tank two inboard and tank two outboard. Um, so, what procedure should you follow if you're defueling this type of aircraft? A, defuel all the tanks at one time. B, defuel the inboard tanks first, the inboard wing tanks first, so the ones that are closest to the root or the fuselage. Or C, defuel the outboard wing tanks first, out in the towards the wing, the farthest out to the wingtips. Keep in mind that there's going to be weight, and so you're worried about balance, especially with this type of aircraft, because you'll notice you probably may or may not notice, but the center of gravity is going to be up at the top of the wing, as opposed to in the back. So if all of a sudden you have a lot of weight in the wingtips, you could actually tip back. So let's defuel the outboard wing tanks first. C. This procedure minimizes the twisting effect on the wing caused by the fuel being located behind the wing attachment points on the fuselage. Oh, all right. No, okay, I like that answer better. But it doesn't really have to do with the center of gravity. It has partial to do with it, but you're right. If all of a sudden you have heavy weight here and the attachment points are forward of that uh, mass, then yes, you're going to have some twisting. Interesting. What safety precautions should be taken before an aircraft is defueled? Well, we did see one. It should be in the open air with plenty of ventilation. I would also have a fire equipment or fire extinguisher handy. Um, Certainly, this is before an aircraft is defueled. Certainly, have your equipment ready. Have your where you're draining it into, which is usually an issue. You'll need some barrels for that, and it's not the best job to be appointed to. Okay. All right, so be sure the fuel truck is properly located. All right, so this is going to be defueled by a fuel truck. The truck and the aircraft are electrically grounded. All electrical power except that needed for the defueling operation is turned off, and the fuel is returned to the proper truck or other container. All right, so I haven't reviewed this answer in a long time, so I'll review this answer and use that as your answer instead of the suggestions I made. I mean, they wouldn't hurt, but I noticed they're not in the list. Um, the fire extinguisher nearby and the proper ventilation, I'm kind of surprised they don't have that. But this is more for a pressure defueling operation. All right, that's going to be all I'm going to cover. I appreciate you sticking around till the end, and I'll see you on the next one. All right, have a good day.